All right, so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our newest Strive conversation. My name is Melissa Tele, and I'm the founder of Strive With Me, which is a platform focused on making personal development and social change more accessible to busy people, and the host of Strive Conversations, where we like to have uncomfortable conversations and make them a little bit more comfortable for people. Today's conversation, we're going to talk about how to navigate dating as an entrepreneur, because dating's difficult, being an entrepreneur is difficult, doing both, especially during a pandemic and quarantine, it's great. So much joy. Anyway, so I have the amazing Steve Dean with me. He's going to introduce himself because he does so many great things. And even though I've been friends with him for so long, I cannot keep up because he continues to grow and learn and do even more amazing things. So Steve, thank you for joining us.
Cool. Thanks for having me. I guess I've been trying to simplify during the pandemic, so it's a lot easier now. I've been strictly focusing on coaching people through their dating and career lives and any other important relationships that they're dealing with right now. There's a lot right now. But beyond coaching, I'm starting the second season of my podcast, which is going to begin in August. I've been recording for the last month, and it's the Date Working podcast, and it's all about how on earth do we navigate from where we are right now. We have all of these different relationships in our lives. We have careers, we have our dating lives, our family life, romantic relationships that intersperse themselves into our actual dating lives. Some people can be in romantic relationships and then keep dating. I think we had someone in the comments talk about being polyamorous, so we can definitely touch on that too today. So beyond my podcast and coaching, I also consult for the dating industry, and I used to host events all the time. That was a relic of times past. I would bring people together for experimental matchmaking events, and anything from like matchmaking in the park, where I'll bring people out with blankets and have them essentially be able to meet new people there. I try to create spaces and moments where people can come together and get to know one another at a deeper level. So I think there's a lot of fun alignments between what I've been working on and what Strive does now. So I'm really excited to be here today.
Awesome. And I think we met right after you left Match. Was it Match.com?
Oh, no, I've been consulting for OkCupid. I was starting my own startup called Job Suitors back in like 2011 to 2014, or 26. Wow, that was like 5 years long. 2016.
Since we've known each other.
Wow. I left there in 2016. That was like matching people to jobs. And then I focused on my own consultancy. I started doing like some borderline matchmaking work, because it's really hard not to match people to things when you know a lot of people and you know that they want things. And then if someone says, I'm looking for an employee, and someone else is like, I'm looking for a job, and you see that they're a good fit, I don't know. I've always found it hard to not just make those connections instantly. Sooner than I'd ever get paid for them. I just do it because I don't want to have my friends ever have me be the reason they didn't get the job. If I'm just looking at these two posts, one after the other on Facebook, and they're both like really easy fits for one another.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I also love making introductions and connecting people that make sense for both sides, right? As a community leader. So I guess I never thought of it as matchmaking. It's more so like, if you like say enough buzzwords or like show enough alignment to this person, let me introduce you because I think the synergy will work well. But yes, so going to the Strive conversations, we're going to talk about how to navigate dating as an entrepreneur. I've kind of had a little bit of fun with this and broke it down to the life cycle of a relationship. So we're going to go from pre-dating, dating, relationships, marriage, breakup, and have the focus of what this experience is like as an entrepreneur. So we're going to kick it off of when you were dating as an entrepreneur, what are a few things to reflect on before putting yourself out there? I think there's a lot of things that we can be aware of or keep in mind. So what are, from your experience, Dave, because I think like both of us have, as we discussed before, both experience as entrepreneurs and experience dating entrepreneurs and creatives, freelancers, and non-entrepreneurs, because I think the dating experience is very different, for me at least.
Yeah. So I guess the first thing that I always note is that I would want to compare entrepreneurship to something like a lifestyle business, where entrepreneurs tend to be focused on growth and de-risking. So You could take Uber, for instance. It's a company that started off trying to get people to ride in each other's cars. And that used to be a thing no one had ever even thought of. Like, it was the thing, like, hitchhiking, is that what this is? You know, we're going to get in a random person's car. This sounds terrible. And it's like super high risk. And then it goes from, I would never do that, to, oh my God, everyone's doing it. It's obvious. I'm going to Uber over there today. So entrepreneurs are taking something that's high risk and making it normal, making it something that's directly accessible to us. Not even high risk, like from an investor standpoint, even not like a safety standpoint. Whereas a lifestyle business is something where it doesn't have to undergo huge sweeping changes. It's not growing at all costs. It's simply a thing that continues in order to like make for a decent lifestyle. You know, you go to work each day and you're not looking to change the world in a super significant way. You change that one person's life and you're great. And I think keeping that in mind, it helps better understand how dating an entrepreneur can lead to certain challenges. Because when you're in an environment where you are trying to de-risk things around you, it potentially involves a lot of uncertainty, because that's where the risk comes from. It's not knowing what'll come next. So dating an entrepreneur or being an entrepreneur typically involves not exactly knowing where the next paycheck will come from. It could mean not knowing where the next investor would come from, what city you'll need to be in to do the work. When I was launching my previous startup, I was in New York, and then I had to go to Seattle to go and live with my other co-founder in order to build out the product. Then I had to go back to New York to launch. Then I had to go to San Francisco to talk to investors. And my life wasn't stable. It wasn't easy to predict where I would be, because that was the nature of the work, is that you have to do what it takes to grow your company and to get it off the ground and to overcome those risk hurdles. And so dating an entrepreneur just means there's a lot more communication that may be needed in order to get a sense of what we can expect together. And I think I would also draw a comparison to dating in the monogamous world versus in the non-monogamous world, where in the monogamous world, there are certain expectations that it might be a little bit more readily available of like what a relationship can look like and what basic norms you may have as a default when you say, yes, I want to be in an exclusive relationship with you. Versus in a non-monogamous relationship, there are not that many defaults that you get to have. You kind of have to take the whole grab bag and say, okay, what is this going to be? We don't have a map ahead of us. We don't have all the, to use a legal metaphor, we don't have like all the tort law. We don't have all the years of completely incorporating Delaware. You know the drill. There's lawyers that know this stuff. Yeah. If you're incorporating elsewhere, then it may be a lot more messy. You don't have all of the expectations laid out for you. And so if you're looking for monogamy, it can be pretty, it's a little bit easier to navigate and define what the relationship is, whereas non-monogamy is messier. So dating someone who has a stable job is one thing. Dating someone who is an entrepreneur, it's a little bit messier. And I don't say that that's better or worse, because some people love the mess. They love the ability to have things be always dynamic, where you don't have the ability to maintain stasis. You can't just say, oh, we're just going to keep it like this forever. Like, you have to communicate, and you have to be comfortable with consistent communication or consistent non-communication, where you say like, oh, I'm going to Singapore for the next 6 weeks on work meetings. Don't expect to have the same amount of attention from me that you had over the last 6 weeks. And so you have to be comfortable with sudden changes. And I think with that comes a level of independence that is really important to foster within yourself, the ability to be on your own for an extended period, because your partner may have big deadlines to meet. They've been called away for work in a different city. Not to say this doesn't happen if you have, a consulting job where you have to fly out every week, Monday to Friday. But even that is still more stable, because it's every week, Monday to Friday. Whereas in entrepreneurship, it can just be so different.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you said that, and it was really relevant to me personally, because I just had this conversation with someone about like relationships and dating as a concept. And for me, I think naturally, and I guess I never tied it into my entrepreneur muscle or way of thinking of like, I purposely try to disqualify people, like if this is a good fit, because for me, I take a look at like a lot of things about them and say like, hey, is this aligned with who I want in a partner? And it kind of goes to answer the question of before you even start dating, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, I definitely think like you should have like a certain understanding of what you want and what you need in this time period in your life. Like some people really enjoy dating to date. Some people enjoy dating for intimacy, whether that's physical, sexual, emotional, mental, whatever that is. And then some people are dating because they want a very specific kind of relationship, whatever that looks like, monogamy, non-monogamy, um, like typical like family, kids, all that stuff, right? Whatever that looks like. And so I think being very conscious and intentional with your dating and communicating that. I think a lot of times, and I'm sure you experience this coming from like the dating app world, is that there are a lot of people that date without the intention, and it actually hurts a relationship because that misalignment causes people to do hurtful things like ghost each other, not be emotionally available, and they weren't really upfront with that, and different things like that. And then I think you add on the pressures and thought process and understanding of an entrepreneur that kind of adds like a much different layer of complexity.
Yeah, and I think I want to go into that complexity for a second, because I think there's a way of that I've found that helps a little bit for at least addressing the complexity and being able to identify it within yourself so you can then communicate it to others. The way I look at it is that we all start, whether we are entrepreneurs or not, whether we're monogamous or not, we start with a relationship of one with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
You could call it solo monogamy, solo polyamory, however you.
Dating myself. That's what I've been doing since this quarantine.
Yeah, but you can have
great.
Just as you can have a startup that is founded by one person, they are the solopreneur, solo founder. You can be the solo founder in your relationship with yourself. And knowing how that relationship works is really important, because what ends up happening after that, as you try to incorporate new people, if you don't know how your relationship with yourself works, then how do you communicate your current stressors, your priors, your habits, your tendencies, all of these things to another person if you don't know what they are and you don't necessarily know how to merge your life with another person's? So whether you're going for a relationship of one, of two, of three, of four, of five, however many co-founders you want, or if you just want one co-founder in your relationship, just you and another person, you could still have contractors. You can have people who are not looking to be part of that relationship as like an identified throuple. Maybe they just want to sleep with one or two of the people on the side. It could be that they want to just date you but not be in a relationship with you. There's plenty of people who pop into your city or you pop into theirs, and maybe they're not part of your
boyfriend. I just had a conversation with someone. I was like, hey, we're only together when we're physically together. And people are like, huh, well, people understand this? I was like, oh, kind of not crazy about this. Like having to explain, like I can see that being very complex to explain to someone else.
It's a lot easier when you say like, if we were to use this metaphor and like really bear it out, I could say I'm in a co-founding relationship with one partner right now. I have multiple other contractors who I've been seeing for years. We have a deep relationship. We have trust. Nothing is changing there. They're the lifestyle businesses that I run on the side. But I have this one startup, which is still such a high growth. And I don't know where it's going to go, but I know that it's going to keep going right now because we're investing in it. We're pouring fuel on that fire. But the other contractor relationships are ones where like, if we're in each other's city, we hit each other up. If they're in a monogamous relationship at the time when I'm in their city, then we just hang out as friends. And if they're not, then we have the option, the options, just more options exist on the table. And I think that there's something about that that makes it a little bit more simple for someone to understand, because I'm not looking to dispense equity in my current startup. It's a startup of two at the moment. And like, just as an example, you know, some people are like, they fear every possible person who could be in your life. They might be really jealous because they don't know what you're trying to build with those people. And if you can communicate, I'm building this with you. You're the one whose equity is vesting with mine in this dynamic. I am not looking for that anymore. I'm not an Elon Musk. I can't run 3, 4, 5 startups simultaneously. I'm running this startup with you, and anything else we'll talk it out as like it's a contractor relationship.
Yeah. I think let's dive a little deeper into that. So I know a lot of people, when we bring up this topic of dating as an entrepreneur, the biggest question that like very shapes and form is, how do you find time to date? How do you prioritize time management, find balance? And a lot of that also comes with a lot of like emotions like guilt, feeling badly for not making time and space for your partner, not being able to like you say, like juggle multiple, not even just dating, just like multiple aspects of your life. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think I came to a really easy answer to this early on, and I consider myself super lucky for having done it. Sorry, a fly just flew into my face. So when I first started matching people to jobs as a profession, but also as like a joy, I was also already matching people to one another romantically. And I was just by happenstance navigating the world of being, I guess, professionally homeless. What do you call it? Like, I was nomadic. I didn't have an apartment for 7 years. And so I was staying with people, but also in staying with them, learning about their lives, referring them to the next person if they needed a dog sitter in their city, basically matching people across every relationship that they needed. What then happened and what I started to notice is that the same people who I would match for a romantic thing, I could also match for a job thing. I could also match for a roommate thing. Like, these relationships exist in our life, whether they are exclusive or not, whether they are happening at the same time or not. I could match someone to a roommate one day, and then that same person's like, oh, I also want a job. And I'm like, okay, let's hook you up there. I could go on a date with someone one day, and then the very same day they'll be saying, wow, I just met one of your friends in this other event. Like, that's really cool. We should all hang out. And it's not in the sense of a threesome, it's in the sense of we're aligned individuals. We would like to spend more time together. The fact that we just went on a date doesn't mean that we can't still be friends. Doesn't mean that I can't refer you to a position, because if we're on a date, like, in theory, I care about you. Or at least we're exploring the potential of a future together. We don't know what dimension it's going to exist on. It may only ever exist as friendship. It may only exist as a strictly networking thing. It may have romantic overtones, and we could take it further in that direction, or we can decide that our lives are not logistically compatible right now or ever. And so we're not going to pursue this romantically, but hey, you're a cool person. And my friends might want to date you. My friends might want to hire you. My friends might want to live with you. All of these things are possible. So when we accept that we have in the extreme complexity of our relationships, and over time, all of them could be relevant to us. The same person you went on a date with, I've had someone 9 years after we went on our first date end up meeting more of my friends inadvertently, and then we hang out again, because even though the romance isn't there anymore, the friendship is there. There's resonance of like, I trust you. You know, it's been years and we're still on this earth together.
Yeah.
Like, you're my confidant in the apocalypse. I feel like that's another type of relationship. But
So
like, the fact that we have all of these, it makes it so much easier to then treat dating as the same as networking, as the same as finding people roommates. It's building out relationships in which you're prioritizing validating what this person's looking to do in their life right now. If they happen to be looking for something you don't want, you can still validate that and say, oh, I'm not looking for that at all right now, actually, but I know people who are. And, or what I could do right now is this, and I'm not interested in the other things right now, but maybe in a couple months.
yeah.
There's so many different ways of engaging with people that I would say that whether it's a date or not, I treat each person as though for the next 100 years, there's going to be millions of different ways our lives could crisscross, intersect, or become more or less relevant to one another. And so each date is just this beautiful pile of potential where, as long as we're showing up with honesty and earnestness and transparency about who we are and what we want, and we're optimizing for growth and learning as much as we can about one another, it makes it so much more satisfying. Like, every relationship, every interaction with people, whether it's a date or not, can just be a moment to get to know them well enough that you can remain relevant in each other's lives.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is, if you're struggling to in find time to date while balancing, I think acknowledging what it is that both sides want and need, recognizing that, if it's not an alignment, that's totally cool. Like, that person can still stay in your life, and hold some kind of capacity, and like maybe an opportunity would come further down in the line. I definitely agree with that. I think for me, based on my experience, I've learned, because I've dated someone that pretty much works like 20 hours a day, like ridiculous work schedule, running multiple startups and things like that. And I really saw in him and other entrepreneurs that I like, friends and in our network, like, when they really want it, they will carve out the time and do that, right? And I don't want to say like that's like a blanket solution. I think everyone has to like really look inwards and be like, how much of a priority is this, and is this relationship, whatever that relationship timeline looks like for the person, can that wait till later? I know for me, like I've struggled with I think I'm still in that journey of like, hey, like I don't know if I really want to date or be in a relationship in the next few years, or even like put in that effort. If it like, I think if I meet someone, like great, but for me, like allocating that energy rather than focusing on what I'm trying to build and all the things I'm working on, both internally, professionally, startup wise, and all that stuff, I don't know if that's worth that investment and equity, as you mentioned earlier. I think it's very important to really be honest with ourselves of like what it is that we really want and prioritize, and work that timeline for us. I think there's a high level pressure from society to say you're supposed to like be in a relationship in your 20s and get married by 30 and have your children in your early 30s and do this and this, and in a way that traditional American dream timeline, you can say, has hurt a lot of people because they feel this pressure to perform in a certain way, to be with someone, and they end up marrying someone or being with someone that isn't aligned, and then they get divorced. So for me, it's like I'd rather just wait to marry, like be with someone or marry someone later in life, if that happens, right?
I got a couple of things on top. I want to stay on top of that.
Yeah.
For one of the fastest growing dating demographics is people over 60. So the idea that your relationship's going to last forever may also be its own societal myth. So there's a lot of people who are still finding their way back into dating. This can be like, if you think about who were you 10 years ago, would you date that person? A lot of times that's a good answer for like, every 10 years, we should probably reassess like, who the hell are we and who are we dating, and are we in the right relationships? And I think it's healthy for any relationship that you're in, but there's no timeline. There's no fixed thing that says if you're not with your forever person by this time, then your life is over. At this point, we don't know when our lives will be over. So it's more important to find out how do we spend them well in the moments that we do have. And in light of that, I think one tactic that could be really useful for people, and it's, if you're an entrepreneur already, you're probably familiar with it, stacking. So, there's like a podcast you can listen to as you brush your teeth, for instance, if you want to be podcasting and teeth brushing, and it teaches you facts as you're brushing, stacking one habit with another. I think when it comes to dating, there's a lot of really easy ways to stack dating and personal development, or dating and creativity, dating and getting outdoors. For me, I literally I have a list of 100 of my favorite date ideas that I put online, but I also put them in my dating profiles, because it's like, it's so easy to come up with. If I think about what do I want to do on a Saturday? So one, I want to get out to a green space, one date idea. I want to play skee ball, another date idea. I want to go pet at least 10 dogs, another date idea. This can all be part of the same date. The more you merge together, the more interesting the date becomes. I want to do yoga. I want to do deep breath work. Easy thing to tie into a date. I want to go and forage for food and then cook it. Really interesting date idea, and it's also a thing I already was going to do.
Yeah.
It could be workout. I've done running dates. I've run like 5-6 miles with someone on a first date, just as a like, why the hell not? And then we'll do like kneecap massages after, as a like, icing on the cake. This, like, you're going to want that after a run. Anything you're already doing, there's no reason that cannot also be a date. That's a dangerous statement for me to make, because automatically my brain is going to other like weird shit that probably wouldn't be a date. But I will say that, I've now been, comment here. That's you, Melissa. Don't ask me to run on a date.
I would break down. Like, I would be like, oh, I am always love to be flexible and down for anything, but if you ask me to run on a date, I'm gonna run home, because I'm not an active person. Like, this body is a lie. Like, it's a lie.
I've done my taxes on a first date. That was a good one.
All right,
It was
you're
okay.
jumping
It
ahead.
was
You're definitely gonna get this list here. You're gonna send me this list of dates.
dog walking, exploring a park and an ocean, sandcastle building, and taxes. That was the date.
Okay. You're jumping ahead of the gun. So let's talk about how to even meet people before we talk all these date ideas, because I don't think we're not gonna have enough time to go through all of your brilliant date ideas, which I love and people are gonna want. But let's talk about how to even meet them before we talk about like what to do in this non-running date. So the next question is, how do you organically meet people outside of dating apps? I think a lot of people are getting like dating app fatigue, especially during the pandemic. But I'm seeing a lot of apathy of like, oh, like I do want to meet someone. I don't know how to meet someone. I'm so tired of these dating apps. What can I do?
Yeah. So this is one of my favorite questions because it's literally in the name of my company that I started in 2011, Date Working. It's a dating and networking. It's two things that people generally hate and don't make enough time for. And a lot of people, they complain about dating, they complain about networking. It's too superficial. It takes too much time.
You're
It's hard
asking
to do
the
it
wrong
right.
question. I
It
don't.
sucks when you do it online. I get too many crappy messages from people all the time. Like it's so much of it is the same.
Can I
And yet,
tell you? Hold on. I'm sorry to cut you off. Can I tell you? I still remember you yelling at me when I first did. I think I did a social experiment when dating apps came around because I work in tech and I'm more on the business ops side, right? But I've always been interested in the user journey of dating apps and like how like I saw early on how it's going to affect the dating culture. And I've always been fascinated on dating and relationships. Hence this talk. And I remember like I showed you like like I think it was like Bumble or something that I like tried but wasn't really serious about. And I just wrote like, hey, and you went off on me. You were like, how like why would you say that that's the most generic like greeting? Like why would you say that you're expecting the guy to do all this work? How is this equality? You say you're a feminist and all stuff. And I was just like, first off, I agree with you. Yes, to all the above. Two, I don't know how this works, which is why I'm on it. And three, yeah, you're right. That was really bad. So when I did date last year, I like upped that game so quick. But also like I was at a different place in my life, right? So I started like not aggressively, like respectfully, like really more flirty questions or more interesting questions, and really like reading all their profile because it was for me it was almost more of like a psychological like experience of trying to understand a person based on their profile and understand who they are, and like really ask these questions. But I remember you like scoring me like, why would you just say hey? Like that's so generic. Like like this is the problem with women. Like they expect like guys to do all the work. And I was like, yeah, okay, that's fair. That's fair. I don't know what to do here. Yeah.
are you ready to hear what to do?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that it's a one-size-fits-all solution, but I think that everyone's natural creativity should be put into play here.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's like your creativity will show up in different ways, but what I'm going to say is that when you think of what it takes to do networking well, it's very similar to what it takes to do dating well. And so one of the main things that I like to do in networking, like, and this even applies to advertising too, word of mouth referrals are worth their weight in gold. You can pay per click all you want, but if you're getting word of mouth referrals, no one can touch you. And so what that means is that whether you are networking and having friends literally tell other people, hey, you need to go try this website or you need to go try this product. This thing is changing my life.
I referred one of my girlfriends to like this guy I went on a date with. I went on this great date and I was like, oh my God, you're so great. I'm not in the space because he was like 40. I just turned 29 last week. He was like 40. He's like ready to settle down. I was like, oh, I'm not, but I know one of my girlfriend is, right? And I was like, he's such a good guy, so sweet, so interesting. Let me make this. Thank you, Brian. Let me make this introduction. And she was like, what the F? Like, what do you mean? Why are you passing him up? If he's so great, why aren't you keeping him? And I was like, I just told you, like, we're not aligned in timeline, but maybe, like, you should be interested. Like, I tried to do a couple of times, like, hey, I went on this date with this guy. He's not for me, but I think you would be interested. And all my girlfriends, like, were like, nah, pass. Like,
I've gotten multiple people married that way inadvertently. It's just like, hey, I'm not the right person for you right now, but this person might be. And I actually would love more than anything in the world to introduce you, because I can already see you hanging out and doing these particular things and just loving every second of it. And whether it's a date context or a networking context, so I think some people had said like they're confused about like, how do you establish which one is which? And for me, it's all about internal consistency. So if you're networking, then like own it. Own what that networking looks like to you. And it doesn't mean running up to someone and trying to like thrust them your business card in the way that people send dick pics online, as though that like, oh, I have this thing, you must want it. Clearly you want it. I want to give it to you now. Like that's kind of how people treat a lot of dating. It's like, yay, how about you come check out my profile and tell me what you think? And it's like, what are you doing? This is not how you are that person at the networking event that ruins it for everyone by like barging into a conversation, handing out business cards and running away. Like that's not how you get referrals. That's how you get kicked out of an event or banned from an app, when you just, hark your wares anywhere you go. It's gross. What's more important is taking the time to make a meaningful impact on someone's life such that they think about you later in a positive way. And they say, oh, Steve did something really nice for me. And now I'm wondering like, well, what does he want? Oh, well, the second part of networking is making it easy for people to refer you. It's not just that you impact them, it's that it's easy for them to then know how to get you what you need next. So I can't just go to a networking event and help people. I also have to at least let them know, like, this is the thing that I'm looking for. Now let's talk about what you're looking for. Like anytime you ever meet someone in the rest of your life who's looking for dating help, who's looking for getting through a relationship, polyamory advice, dealing with getting a new job or a new apartment, new roommates, talk to me.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for this thing, that's not me. But let's talk about you now. Like, what is it that you're actually trying to find here? And how can I take the next couple minutes of my life to make a meaningful impact on your life? And if you think about that from a dating context, like it gets a little bit messier because it's hard to do that like in a first message, maybe in a larger scale dating event or like a soiree kind of thing. It's easier to walk up to someone and make a mission together, get to know who they are, how they interact with the world, and later find out whether or not there's a little bit more compatibility. But when it's like a dating app, it's a little bit harder to do that as a first pass. You don't just say like, hey, let's talk about what you're looking for in life. And by the way, refer me to someone. That's not how it works. For me, it's treating the date as hey, I'm really looking to go and do these particular kinds of things in my life. I don't know if you're the ideal person to be doing these things with me indefinitely, but given what it says in your profile, I think if we did these things together, it would actually be really fun. It makes it so much easier because then it's saying, I'm not trying to force you into anything here, but I am noticing that there are certain alignments and I do want to talk about them.
Yeah. So going back, I definitely hear your point about word of mouth. I think that's a really interesting concept. Maybe I'll give that a try again and refer people to my girlfriends, and guy friends and every friend. So what are additional ways that you think you can meet people, especially outside of dating apps?
So public parks are still a thing that we can make use of. Anything from putting out a blanket and inviting people to join, bringing your friends and making it into a little bit more of a convivial thing. Going on scavenger hunts or scheduling them. I think one of the most fun things is just anything that creates gravity. Anytime you can pull people together for a shared purpose, it makes it easier. Like I met one of my closest friends in New York through a free public laser tag event in Washington Square Park, where I just happened to show up. He happened to show up. And after playing laser tag for a bit, we went out for food. And then from there, a friendship was born. And those kinds of things, we still have the capacity to create. Even in quarantine, we can still, like right now, I walk up the street about maybe 2-3 days a week. And there's a little ledge overlooking a sidewalk. And it has enough space for about 10 people to keep 6 feet of distance and still all talk together. And it's become this little like neighborhood Sesame Street where people just walk by, hang out with their dogs, chat for hours, watch the sunset. And in the first 2 days of doing it, a woman walked up who was around my age and single and looking and was talking openly about like her dating struggles. And then we ended up giving her a combination of like dating advice, but also in the same day I met her, I referred her to a friend of mine to date. And so it's so easy in some ways if your orientation is toward just helping people and hearing them out and letting them share a little bit of their story. All you need then is a space where they will show up so
Mm.
that you can actually share that space together. And ideally, it's a space where they're not going to feel put upon, where they're not going to feel as though they have to be doing something. So I really like these kind of open air, open-ended environments where there are things to do. You can hang out, you can pet some dogs, you can talk, you can simply listen. All of these are valid options. You can watch the sunset, you can take pictures.
Yeah.
And you're part of this ambient environment where you do get to engage with people if you choose, and you get to do it on your own terms.
Yeah, I hear you, and I kind of want to ask one follow-up question. I want to be conscious on time because it is we have 15 minutes left, and if anyone has like very specific questions, please share it in the chat. We have a few questions that we're gonna try to get through. I think it's interesting because I've talked to male identifying friends where they're like, hey, I really want to approach a woman, but they don't want to come off as a creep, right? Like if you see people in public, especially now where it's like, oh my God, I don't know you, like really, like I don't even want my friends close to me, let alone like a stranger. And there's that layer, well, like how do I approach someone respectfully and not come off as too aggressive or like stalkerish or things like that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll give you first a point on what not to do. My friend just today posted about how a man catcalled her from inside a car as he was driving by without a mask on while he was driving, which is, I guess, okay to not be wearing a mask while driving. Catcalling out of a car window, please don't do that.
Pre-pandemic.
He then followed her. He looped the block several times, followed her until he had a sense of where she was like going toward, got out of the car, walked up, like ran up to her, and then said, hey, I'm the guy from the car who was just talking to you earlier. Like, do you want to go on a date? And he had no mask on and came right up to her and was talking at her face like that. And she's like, what the ever-loving hell is happening? Like, how is this in any way acceptable? So no, never do that. Especially now, do not approach
more
people.
than you think.
Categorically, do not approach people right now. This is not the time. What you can do, though, look for outdoor, public, or private gatherings. So one of the things that a lot of my friends are doing are they're hosting socially distanced friend gatherings. So they're going to have a park party where you play music together. You keep your distance, but you can bring your friends. And that way you can actually see, make eye contact with, chat with a number of different people at a time in a way that allows for people to get to know one another and maybe determine whether there's a little bit of a vibe happening there. And since you have the kinship, you have this like linked connections of all these overlapping friendships, it's not hard to then find out later, like, oh, who is that person? Like, bring your allies to this, because you could say, who is that person? Did you manage to talk to them? Like, I thought they were pretty cute. And that person, your friend, could say, oh yeah, we actually did talk. And it turns out like her husband was cool too. And you're like, okay, maybe I shouldn't approach her. And then they'll be like, oh, but they're poly, so you totally should. She was actually making eyes at you too. Like, that's how the conversation unfolds when you show up in an event and you actually, you know, become like be referable. So don't do shit that makes people feel uncomfortable. Show up with kindness and make it so that people want to connect with you later. That's one. Two is like bring your friends so that you can multiply the number of conversational vectors and the amount of information exchange, because that allows you to then better understand what's going on around here.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. One question we have, especially when it comes to like first dating, like how do you show someone like you're available?
One of the things that I like to do is talk very candidly about essentially what my startups are, not in the startup-y sense, but in the relationship sense. I'll talk about the things that I'm working on in my personal life, the things that I'm looking for over the next several years, talk about some past relationships and how they've shaped me. And I don't just blurt and talk about this indefinitely, like talk someone's ear off about myself. It's more that I will ask a question about someone's past, about where they are now, about what they're looking for, but I'll also share a little bit about mine so that they have a context. It's not just me demanding information from them, because that can make them feel really uncomfortable. But if you ask like, what was like the weirdest date you've gone on? And then you can share a quick story of yours that basically sets the scene of like, oh, I'm willing to go vulnerable first, so that you can then feel safe to be able to go more or less based on how you want to go. And if you go all in on that and you share just as vulnerable or more vulnerable a story, then that's a sign of rapport. It's a sign that you're not only connecting with me, but also interested in going even further than I originally tossed that first ball.
Yeah, I definitely think that going vulnerable is really important, both in a professional perspective, right? Like I will be the first to admit like, hey, I have no idea what I'm doing here, or like, hey, I'm really struggling with X, Y, and Z, and they're like, oh my god, like yeah, like I'm struggling with that too, and same thing with dating. And I think it's interesting when you're in a certain like context relationship, whether that's like coffee or anything like that, just going in and saying like asking more personal questions respectfully and kind of like test the water there. I think I recognize that in a way I maybe in a much more privileged position because like being identifying as a female and often seem less threatening, so I can ask more personal questions. People are like, oh yeah, she just like wants to get to know me, like that's cool. She's just not going to like aggressively hit on me or like be like a physical threat or anything like that. So I definitely think like showing that vulnerability tastefully and mindfully and gradually kind of building on that to see if is this just a strictly like business relationship, which some people do want, right? Or like in the dating context, some people just want like just a date versus like something more in depth.
Yeah. I saw that Victor had a question. I think I can address that about like being assertive on your like if you're at a networking event, if you want to indicate that you are interested in someone in a romantic way. I would actually recommend categorically not doing that at a networking event, because that's one of the number one triggers for a lot of female identified people is like having men hit on them, or their prospective investors start hitting on them and make it seem like they want to get a drink, even though, and then it's a question of like, what are you here for? Are you here for my body? Are you here for my startup? Are you here for my other investors? Like, what is going on here? And I hate that those kinds of things get conflated. So my general thing is follow a rule from marketing and advertising, which is that you need several touch points before you ultimately make a sale. And so it's not a matter of simply trying to get this person the first day you meet them when they have no priors. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know if they have a stomach ache or if they're tired, and you just show up trying to like thrust your business card in their face, you know, metaphorically. No. I never will recommend that. What I would say is check in with them and say like, you know, you can comment on what you say, like, hey, how's everything going for you right now? Like, has this been a good event? What are you looking for? And then as you get to know what they're looking for professionally, because that's the nature of the event that you're at, you can think about what are the follow-up touch points that would make sense here. Maybe you have a connection you could send their way. You can add them on LinkedIn. You can potentially say like, hey, there's an event coming up that might actually be really good for you. So you're going out of your way to think about them, which is a sexy thing, regardless of whether it's also professionally applicable. If someone is interested in you and you're showing consistent thought about them and their success, that in and of itself is showing your own confidence, your own ability to deliver, your own sexiness in a way. And if they do want to follow up, if they happen to be single and available and interested, then maybe they'll do the same for you. Maybe they'll start trying to follow up. And at that point, what I would then say is try to always keep in your hand, in your deck, I'm using like a Magic the Gathering metaphor or a poker metaphor, keep additional events and opportunities in mind. And entrepreneurs are really good at having these on hand, because you're always going to meet up to networking events and friend gatherings and campfires, things like personal development retreats. All of these different things are avenues and vectors that you can invite someone into. Like I do that all the time. I'll say like, hey, you should join the personal development nerds group, because there's always going to be events there. We can connect later. Like you don't have to make the sale in the moment. That is not how human relationships need to work or functionally prosper. It's that's way too much too soon, and you run the risk of just making people feel extraordinarily uncomfortable, and then you become the person they will never refer. They'll literally say, oh, talk to everyone except that dude over there, he came on to me at a networking event, he's gross.
Yeah. Sharing from a female perspective, I 100% agree with Steve. I think I get it, right? Like the traditional image of dating is like, especially like I grew up in the 90s, right? Where like dating was like you meet someone and you ask them out on the date like right then and there, like within like 30 minutes. Like unfortunately, Disney and Hitch and all these other movies are not accurate depiction of dating. Surprise, surprise, because they only have 90 minutes to tell a story that's supposed to last for 60 years. Maybe that's one way to look at it. But also, yeah, it is extremely uncomfortable. And I can tell, like I host events. And this goes with like people who like flirt with servers or people that flirt with people that are working, right? Like it is so uncomfortable, because that is, especially now, talking about like Me Too, and sexual harassment and things like that, like aggressively flirting with someone while they're working, when it's literally their job to be nice and to serve and to be supportive and create this comfortable environment for you to like aggressively flirt with them or hit on them or try to get their number is so unprofessional, so uncomfortable, and is a huge immediate turn off. And it is very triggering because I do get a sense of that vibe, right? Even if they're not asking me, I get that vibe of like, oh, hey, like, do you work here? Or like all this stuff. And it's like very uncomfortable. Victor says, that's where I overcorrect myself to end and avoid that and not know how to create attraction. I think this is a very real problem, and I'm acknowledging that, Victor. Thank you for being conscious of it. I think that's really important. Like similar to Steve, I think so one of the levels of attraction is repetition, right? The idea of repetition exposure, like the more you see someone, not from a stalker perspective, but like the more you, because some people are like, hey, like they're just gonna like all your pictures and do all this. I was like, that's not it. The more you like interact and you run into each other at events, or you're like, hey, like I thought of you for this, or like, hey, I saw based on like LinkedIn, you're working on this, like, can I get to know you? Like, can we talk about this? And like finding mutual interest and having that as what brings you together, rather than like, I saw you, I know nothing about you, I think you're attractive, you should go out with me. Like that is what communicates, like what Steve mentioned before, like, are you only interested in my body versus like who I am as a human being, right? And so that can be triggering. I will say that I recognize that we are running out of time. Steve, if you're on, we still have a few more questions. If you're comfortable staying on, if everyone else is, we're gonna just keep it going because we have a lot of really great questions here. Let's see. How is someone who's perceived as an entrepreneur, in this case, the person identifies as a man, comes off in a dating app?
Honestly, I think that it's really easy to date as an entrepreneur when it comes to like how you present yourself on a dating app. For one thing, it's kind of sad to think about, but it's also commonplace, is that a lot of female identified people will say, for the love of God, the only thing that I want in a partner is that you're passionate about something. Care about something. And being an entrepreneur is almost definitionally, I care about something here. Like, I'm willing to throw away any expectations of a normal life in order to do this thing that I care about. And so your passion's coming first. And I think that's like a huge benefit for any dating profile. However, if you just say I'm an entrepreneur, people will code that as I'm unemployed. And so if you are going to be identifying your startup, your passion, whatever that is, do it in a way that lets someone gain more information and respond in their mind with like exclamation points and hearts, not question marks. Whenever someone's going through the profile, you want the nods, the smiles. Like, you literally can, if you watch people go through dating profiles, they will nod and smile when they like it. They will laugh. Sometimes they will look and they'll be like, like, just look at someone's face as they're looking at your profile, and you'll really quickly understand whether you're doing it right or wrong. So if you just say like, I'm an entrepreneur, I like making money, then people will be like, But if you say like, I'm launching a startup that helps find puppies new homes, and I'm really excited about this, I've been going to all these events, I'm also single, and it's not because I don't have time, it's because I have been investing my time in this startup. And here's the things that I'm really excited to potentially do in order to bring dating into my life. I want to be going on these things, on like long walks, not on the beach. Don't say that, please. Just list the ways in which people can engage with you. Basically, like, paint the picture of what the life they could be living with you would look like, and try to do it accurately. Because honestly, I'll give another fun example that like helps capture this. I met a woman when I was speaking at a dating conference this past January, and she said she only dates entrepreneurs. And her thing is, she's an entrepreneur and she is busy all the time. She works minimum 50 to 70-hour work weeks. She only wants people who are super busy. She likes people who are driven and passionate and have a mission and are going to go after it. And so she just wants to know that they're both on separate missions. It doesn't even matter to her whether they're going to end up in the same room or bed at the end of the night. What's important to her is that, hey, you care about this thing, you're driven, I'm driven, let's keep doing this together and find any comparative advantages we have. Oh, you're networking with these investors, send them my way. Oh, you just went to an event that I couldn't go to because I was too tired. Great, did you get business cards? I'll do the follow-ups. You know, like there's so many intersectional ways that you can engage with people when you're an entrepreneur seeking entrepreneurs, that It's actually, I don't know, I just really like the idea that you're able as an entrepreneur to define like what role dating gets to play in your life. And in so doing, you make it easy for other people to then be able to engage with you because you can paint that picture really well for them.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And and Brian said, describe your work with more verbs and less noun. Love it. I definitely agree. Like for me, it's very important about learning about what someone's passionate in. Like for me, I do primarily gravitates more towards entrepreneurs as well, because I understand that there's alignment in mindset, priorities, like understanding each other's lifestyle and things like that. Um, but what does that mean? Like I do, like, because I'm also an entrepreneur and work with a lot of entrepreneurs and mentor and advise and things like that. Like I can tell who's serious and who's like, I'm just saying that to be cool. So next question, what mindset should we go into dating someone that's an entrepreneur, usually someone that's type A and mission and career driven?
I think regardless of mindset, it's just important to have some basic communication vehicles in place, because with any person you're dating, you have your own startup of one, they have their own startup of one, plus their actual startup. And they may not only have relationships with their vendors, with their team and their co-founders, their contractors, and their investors, and their friends and family. Like there's just lots of relationships that get baked into the equation as an entrepreneur that you're essentially responsible for managing. That when you're trying to talk to someone who's an entrepreneur, you have to recognize that they have a lot of competing relationships. And those relationships all potentially take time and effort and emotional attention. And if you're already doling out that much emotional capacity of yours each day to your other relationships within your startup, it can be really hard to have a lot left over for dating and for giving it to your partner or partners. So I think it's important to, as an entrepreneur, pick the work that makes you feel like you have excess capacity because you're so excited about it, you're so passionate about it. And when people see you working there, they get energy from you. But when you're trying to date an entrepreneur, keep the communication vehicles in place that allow you to realistically talk about what your availability looks like and be able to have really key ways for like, oh, there's a board meeting that was just called and I have to be at it. I'm sorry that I can't make dinner. Like those kinds of conversations will come up when you're dating entrepreneurs or anyone who's in a higher responsibility role, potentially even in a low responsibility role. Like a lot of our frontline workers right now, people who are like, they'll be told you get kicked out of your job if you don't show up to bag groceries today. And if you lose that job, you lose insurance. And so it's not even so much about being an entrepreneur, but it's also just about recognizing that people have really intense demands on their time and attention and emotions, and being able to create space in any relationship and in any dynamic to validate that, first of all, and recognize and share what it is that actually your life looks like, but also to then celebrate it. Because just as in polyamory, if you're going to see that your partner already has multiple partners, you might celebrate because you're like, oh shit, I'm so glad that like your partners are helping to meet a whole variety of your needs already. I wonder what space you're still trying to fill out here. Like, what is it that you're still missing in your life? What is it you're still trying to layer into this series of overlapping dynamics? Because then once you know that, you can say, oh, that's exactly where I want to come in. You know, oh, you're only free on Friday nights and no other time of the week because you're busy every other moment, but you do have every Friday night available. That's when I'm free. This is perfect. Let's have a relationship that centers upon that for now.
Yeah.
And like, that's an available option if you have the information to work with. But imagine if you didn't have that conversation about what your actual availability is, and you're only getting texted back every Thursday night to set up a Friday night thing. You'll be wondering like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I definitely hear you. I think communication and understanding where you are is very important. So another thing about this is, how do you manage being on, right? Like, as I mentioned earlier, when we first started this, like, I think as entrepreneurs, we have our like on phase versus your relaxed side with your partner. Like, how do you balance that?
This is a hard one because, I mean, I'm an entrepreneur in my case, and I also live with one of my partners full time. We spent almost every minute of the last 8 months together, which has also been hard because I'm polyamorous. And so I have other partners in other parts of the city and other cities and other countries who I'm still trying to make time for, even though I'm living in a 1-bedroom with my partner right now. So it's been hard to make that kind of time. and to remain consistently available to each of my partners in the ways that they need. Um, I think that in order to maintain like your sense of self through all of this and appropriate boundaries, it's simply important to talk about what those boundaries need to look like in order for you to feel healthy and safe. So like one of the things that I started doing with my partner was we'd pick 2 days a week in which we essentially try to ignore each other and pretend that we're not in the same space. We take our calls in different rooms so that our work lives can be like ever so slightly separated.
Mm.
Um, we do things like going on, like I'll take a long solo walk to talk to my other partners so that like my partner who I live with has space to be able to essentially be with herself. I've even like I expanded, like I guess together we expanded our quarantine. So we have 6 people that we are essentially quarantined with with our own rules, and they're in different spaces. So I can go visit them at their spaces and leave my partner an entire weekend away from me so that she can simply have her life.
Yeah.
Um, so like there are certainly many different ways that we can create these spaces, but I think a lot of it does require that we first recognize that having personal space, having boundaries is important. And I think any entrepreneur who's past their first startup will already know that this is an essential thing. And this is why a lot of people who get into sports are really good entrepreneurs, because they're good at boundaries. They're good at simply saying like, I'm doing workouts from this time to this time, then I have a game from this time to this time. Nothing gets to take over that space. And in entrepreneurship, it's really important to be able to say, you know, this is the time I'm spending on this work today, and I'll be spending this time tomorrow as well. But if you start missing meals, if you start skipping other important meetings, if you start neglecting your partners and your relationships, or neglecting your relationship to yourself just to feed your startup, then you got to question, well, is this startup an abusive relationship? Is this a bad, I mean, and a lot of people will say yes. Like, I will certainly admit to that. In my first startup, very much so. There were many forms. If you read this out as two parts, if I, instead of my startup, I said my partner, people would be like, oh my God, what is your life? Your partner kept you up for 40 hours straight? Like, that doesn't seem healthy. You would have skipped 2 meals just so you could make your partner happy. Like, no. Like, think about it that way. And then think about, once again, like, relationship of one that exists always, no matter what. You never get to leave the relationship you have with yourself and your own body. I mean, maybe you could live in the VR world, like, but still, you're breathing. You have to breathe. And that's your first relationship that you're obliged to. And then your next one is with potentially your company, if you don't have a romantic partner, or your romantic partner. If you're then an entrepreneur, you have to be able to, like, if you're an entrepreneur with a romantic partner, you're already polyamorous, essentially. You have 2 different people, you know, if your corporation is your if you've incorporated your startup, it becomes a person in the eyes of the law, I guess. But yeah, it's this thing that you now are legally beholden to in a meaningful way. And so you have to learn how to talk about boundaries, how to talk about expectations, and set them appropriately.
Yeah. So I think this transitions into the next question really well, is like, what are those boundaries that you that you should set when it comes to dating and relationships? I realized for me, like, that space, and like personal respect is really important. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about your boundaries and what that looks like in a healthy relationship.
Yeah. The way I look at it is that whether it's a startup or a relationship with another human, what's important is that these things are vehicles toward self-actualization, toward personal freedom, and the essentially like living out your values. And so if your startup is causing you to become a terrible person, then maybe this is not the right startup for you. If you're being terrible to yourself, to your family, to your friends, if you are engaged in terrible business practices that are super deceptive because that's what you think is needed for your startup to grow, then maybe this startup's not actually the thing that's helping you become the person you want to be. Likewise, with any relationship that you're in, the boundaries, or at least like the way I'd approach it is, how does this relationship, which I've already compared to a startup, how does this thing that I'm building with another person enable both of us to thrive? And so we have to define, what does it mean for us to be thriving? Is it an amount of time we spend together? Is it the forms of love we generate? Is it the ripples of impact we have upon others? Like in a friendship, like the same deal. Like what are the friendships in your life? How are they enabling you to thrive? What are the things that they're doing in your life that allow you to feel more yourself? And are they holding you to higher standards? Are they lifting you up? Do you become a better person by virtue of engaging with them? And like, I feel like these are all healthy standards to apply, whether in business or friendship or roommates or romantic relationships. It's so important to always keep those frames of like, am I becoming a better person? Is the world becoming a better place by virtue of my engagement in these activities?
Mm.
And I feel like, I mean, granted, like having sex with your partner, maybe the world's not becoming a better place just by virtue of that. But who knows? I think having more oxytocin, dopamine, happy neurotransmitters going back and forth, that's making the world a little bit better. It's carving out space in which happiness and pleasure can exist and not be faulted, not be penalized. Like that is a good thing for the world. And once you've engaged in that with someone else, you then have the capacity to do it again in the future. Or you have new mental models around how it can be done so that you can be a better steward of that in the future. Like doing kind things for others, whether friends or in a networking sense, gives you the ability to recognize, when other people are doing the same kind of things that you'll now notice because you've just done it, but also it gives you better insights into how to do better in those vectors. So if I'm helping someone get connected to a roommate, it teaches me what those conversations look like. What is an effective strategy for matchmaking? What makes each party say, hey, that was a really good experience. So in almost anything in life that we do, we can always, by virtue of doing it, learn from it, and then apply that to our future standards for like, hey, doing that was really good. I want to keep doing this. I'm seeing the positive impact of it. I'd like to learn how to do it even better. Like in every case, whatever relationship we have, whatever actions we're taking, I love this as a standard.
That's really good. That's really good. So now I'm curious. I know a lot of people are interested in this question. Would you ever, what are your thoughts on starting a business with your significant other, whether that's dating, marriage, or anything like that? People feel very particular about this.
I would say that the first and most important thing is that you know how to have strong boundaries. Because at the end of the day, legally, it can be a clusterfuck. Emotionally, it can be a clusterfuck if your boundaries are not strong and well respected, and you have a history of respecting each other's boundaries well. So I wouldn't jump right into it. If you're sleeping with somebody, like, oh, let's also start a business before we know anything about how we handle conflict, how we process emotions, how we externalize sources of anxiety and frustration in our lives. All of these things become important, whether building a relationship or a startup. How you show up in the world around you. Like someone can be really awesome for you when you're behind closed doors and absolutely terrible when they're in front of other people. That's a pretty relevant concern in dating and in startups. But when it comes to choosing to do that with someone else, I think like there have been plenty of successful startups that start with people who are already romantically entwined. Sometimes I've seen problematic ones where like a woman's starting a startup using her husband's money that she married into. And then I'm thinking like, like this is a terrible idea. From an objective like business standpoint, this will not succeed. And it's clear that he has no idea the extent to which this will not succeed. And it's not a gendered thing per se, other than like men just tending to have more money on the whole because of patriarchy. But yeah, like I generally don't recommend it as a matter of course, but if you have an idea and your partner that you totally trust is also on board with it and you have really good practices and habits already, then like I wouldn't say don't do it. Like there's no objective rule that says you should not start something with your partner. But yeah, like if your relationship at home isn't extraordinarily healthy and your communication isn't flawless, then I think it's really hard to successfully add an additional extraneous relationship on top of an existing relationship. And I've tried it. Like I'm it's challenging because then if like let's say you're having a fight over the business side of things, your partner says, oh, I don't think you're pulling your weight here. Like in that same hour you might be sleeping together, so you gotta have to like you can be fighting on one dimension and fucking on the other, and those are two really difficult things to hold in yourself at the same time.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. And I think that's the hesitation too. And I really appreciate your advice of like ensure that you have those healthy boundaries and that you have those standards set in place before you do it. one question about like that stress. Like how do you prevent yourself from projecting the business stress?
I mean, is this in the context of any relationships that you may be projecting that stress from? Because that applies equally to family, to your romantic partners, to your friends.
Yeah, true.
I think that's a matter of knowing yourself and knowing how you show up in different scenarios. So journaling can be a good, helpful guide of understanding, like, how do I talk to myself? What is my self-talk like? Is that also played, like, if I journal and write down my thoughts, are those same thoughts coming out to other people? Do I want thoughts like that coming out to people? Maybe I should modify my self-talk first. So I would say, like, develop a habit around journaling and finding ways of externalizing your emotions so that you can be able to look at them a little bit more objectively and be able to say, oh, ooh, I didn't realize that's what's been coming out of my mouth. I must be under a lot of stress right now.
Yeah, I think that's great, and it goes back to those boundary in space. I think that whether you're in a business with your partner or not, being able to have that space to decompress yourself and be able to separate that is really important. Another question that the attendees sent in is, what are your thoughts and feelings on ethical polyamory and conscious monogamy? Which we kind of really got into.
Oh, yeah. I would say that ethical non-monogamy, I don't use the term polygamy because that really refers to marriage, and that's currently illegal in the United States, so it's just not really a relevant term.
I always like confuse
together. Polyamory is even like I think the easiest first phrase is just ethical non-monogamy.
Okay.
Because it's simply anything that's not strictly monogamy. And my thoughts on it are, if you are in a place where you can have one healthy relationship with yourself and one healthy relationship with another person, and you've practiced, or at least are willing to take a risk on trying to maintain a healthy relationship with an additional person, then by all means do it. If you currently are not having a healthy relationship with yourself or your partner, this is not the time to necessarily try to take on another partner. That would be like saying, I'm running 2 failing startups, but I'm ready to start a third. And that is not a healthy way to go about life, I would say. Also, okay, I want to make sure I'm not holding my thumb over the speaker. In addition to that, I strongly recommend certain tenets of non-monogamy when it comes to how to engage with other individuals. Because if you're an entrepreneur, one of the things that is almost like a default in your life is that your your relationship to work is atypical. You're not necessarily in the 9 to 5. You can't have things be normal or expected. There's no guarantee of exactly what's going to happen next. And so that also applies to non-monogamy. You have non-traditional overlapping relationships. And so the conversations are different. If you imagine this conversation from a monogamous standpoint. You come home at 11 and you're like, hey, sorry, I was at Angela's house. And your partner's like, oh, was it a networking event? And you're like, yeah, it started that way. And then it became, then her boyfriend came over and we all had a threesome. Like, in a polyamorous context, that could be like, oh, cool. Did you at least talk about business too? Because that was one of the reasons you had said you were going. Or it could be, oh, why didn't you invite me? I was totally free tonight. Can we set a time for next week to try again? Like, all of these can be normal responses in a non-monogamous scenario and do not lead to the world ending as it would potentially in a monogamous scenario. So I think that the nature of how you speak, what you talk about, what terms and what almost like emotional flows are available to you fundamentally shifts when you no longer operate within the bounds of monogamy, because the priors change. You are no longer in a world where if your partner is with someone else, it is wrong or bad or unacceptable or hurtful. It can be something that you've organized. I've had my partners set up dates for me and other people. Sometimes I've had them set it up with them included and other people, or with 2 other people that I don't even know and maybe they've only just met, or that they found on a dating app and said, hey, I think you should go meet my partner. Like, all of these things exist and are real. Just as in entrepreneurship, there are things you can do that would be really problematic in
a work environment. So imagine, let's say I guess it's not really entrepreneurship. I'm saying if you work at Apple and then you say like, oh, I was just hanging out with my friends at Google, and we were working on some projects. Your manager at Apple would be like, what? Like, that's you committed to us. We have a contract. We own every line of code you write. And so the worlds are different, and they're not worse or better. It's simply different. You have different lexicons that you use, different priors, different expectations. And so I think the key thing to remember is that yes, 100% ethical non-monogamy can work exceptionally well because there are no automatic assumptions. You get to say, I'm running this startup, I'm running this other startup, I'm running this other startup. Here's my time that's available. I'm available on Thursdays at 2 p.m. If that can be our relationship, great. If it's not, then maybe we're not right for one another right now.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I feel like you have a lot more experience for it. For someone that may be even considering it, I think that's a lot of internal conversations to reflect on oneself of like, hey, how do I feel if my partner is interested in someone else? Like, how do I feel towards jealousy? And what is my relationship with, like, I think in dating, I remember when I was younger, a lot of people would be like, oh, you're mine, right? Like the sense of ownership of another human being is like very interesting. And so I think that if you're exploring it, like definitely explore with it yourself first in a sense of like understand like what are your boundaries, what are you comfortable with and not comfortable with. Are you communicating with your partner of like, hey, if we were to explore this, what does that look like? Like, do you want to know if I'm dating other people? Do you want to know if I'm like kissing other people? Do you want to know if I'm sleeping with other people? Like, what does that look like? And ask in return. And then go into the layers of like, okay, like this is like, who's the primary, who's the focus? Are you one of many? What does that look like? And I think that level of transparency and conversation is so essential to making it work. Because I think like once you go into it and not communicate these things, it becomes very dangerous. And because there's a lot more feelings involved, right? Depending on how you are in terms of jealousy, possession and territorial and things like that, that's like really important.
Yeah. The main thing to remember though, in that case is just non-monogamy is not an excuse for being shitty at monogamy. Like if you're bad at committing, if you're bad at being honest with your monogamous partners about your interest in other people, that will just as equally make you a bad polyamorous partner. Because the main thing you learn in polyamory and non-monogamy is that the honesty is radically more important because you have more lives on the line. If you're indiscriminately hooking up with people and not telling them or like pretending that you're poly, that's horrific because you're spreading so much more disease risk and emotional harm. And I think one of the main things that any poly person will tell you, any non-monogamous person who's practicing ethically is going to say, it takes a lot more communication. You don't just get right into fucking someone. You talk about like, oh, who else are you seeing? What are your past relationships like? How do you show up in a relationship? And if not a relationship, how do you just show up in general? What are your boundaries? What are your expectations for a safe sexual encounter? Like all of this gets talked about. You don't just rely on like the heat of the moment passion. A lot of non-monogamous people consider monogamous people extremely dangerous because they don't have all of these shared priors. They don't have the expectation that you're going to be talking through these things for a while beforehand.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think that those are really good things to talk about. We heard you. It was just like a little muffled. So now that we've gone through like pre-dating, dating, relationships, let's talk about breakups. What are some healthy advice to get over a breakup during pandemic because you are locked in, you're upset. Yep. It's rough. It's rough out there.
Oh, I mean, I think one of the coolest things about breakups now is that you get so much more time to just reflect and enjoy solitude.
And heal. Please take time to heal, people.
And that's, even if you're not in the context of a breakup right now, you can still spend your time thinking about the relationship you have with you. Like you never get to break up with yourself really. Like you're kind of stuck with that person. So building and healing that relationship is always going to be great. And if super, like, imagine like when you go back to the framing of like, I have my startup of me and I have an additional startup with another person. If that person breaks up with me, I'm not broken forever. It just means that I now have my startup of me back in action. And some people are like, oh my God, I hate being with myself. I suck. And it's like, oh, you think? You wonder why other people are struggling to maintain a startup with you? Like, what a great opportunity to streamline some of the things in your life that would make you a lot more open, a lot more available, have more spaciousness inside yourself. Practice some mindful communication.
Yeah.
Layer that inward. Try speaking and acting mindfully and generously toward yourself. Try setting better boundaries and expectations with yourself, because if you can't hold them to yourself, then how are you going to hold them to another person? So I think breakups every time I see a breakup on the horizon, I get like, part of me is like sad because maybe we had built something really cool and I liked it, and we had some comparative advantages that we built into that relationship. But in breaking up, I accept that if someone's going to initiate a breakup, there's probably a pretty compelling reason. Their needs aren't being met. They've tried it. They've iterated and pivoted several times, and suddenly they're like, I can't do this anymore. I don't have the stamina. It's not in me. I'm done. And in that case, I would say, thank you for sharing honestly with me, like how you feel and what you need here. And the fact that I can't provide it, like sometimes you just know. It's like, yeah, I'm in a shitty place right now. My startups are eating all my attention. My own body is like struggling. I'm not a good partner right now. And you can make a case for like, hey, this is a phase. This is like, I'm hoping that this will be over by this time. Can we commit to that? And they can still say no. And then it's like, okay. Like, thank you for respecting your own boundaries here and sharing them honestly with me. That's the most important thing here. I will go back to this relationship I have with myself, and I will begin nurturing it once again.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And it's funny because I started to, like when people tell me about like, oh, I just went through this breakup like so long ago, I was like, oh, congratulations. And it takes people back. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, oh, like, I'm sure you had your reasons why it didn't work out, whether you broke up with them or they broke up with you, but like, it's good that you guys didn't stay together when it wasn't going to work, like when it didn't work. I think people stay on for a little too long, and that slight reframing of like, oh, breakup's not a bad thing. Like, depending on the relationship, you can be friends, you can like still appreciate, cherish each other during the relationship, after the relationship, whatever that looks like. But I think that like similar to startups, not every startup is going to work out. Not every startup is going to be like the next LG, Comcast, or like whatever it is, like, right? But you learn from that experience and you go on and build better companies, hopefully, if you take the time to reflect and heal and work on yourself, then you're able to grow versus repeat the same business or personal mistakes.
And even when you look at like when people made a lot of their wealth as entrepreneurs, it's usually after age 40 or 50. And so you have to fail several times sometimes in order to get to a place. I don't know who's doing the clicking sound. I'm sorry about that. But okay, maybe it's me. But you do have to, okay, I'll fail with my clicking sound several times before I get it right. There you go. That's perfect. It's not guaranteed you'll get it right the first time or with the first person. And it's just a matter of how can you create habits that are going to benefit you throughout life rather than just in the moment. I never want to optimize just for the growth of one thing in one moment, because it could be growth in the wrong direction. It could be growth toward the wrong end. And so what I want to think about is like, what's a habit now that's going to serve me, not just in this relationship, but in all future relationships. And I think those are the ones that people respect the most, because it really shows in your character.
Yeah. I think that's a great note to end on. I'm going to ask Steve, so please tell us what you're striving for and what this community can do to help you, both the people on this call and watching the YouTube that made it to this point.
Yeah. I mean, I'm striving to see a world in which people can approach relationships with a lot more flexibility and poise and fun. Like I don't believe that relationships have to suck. And a lot of people believe that dating and networking and relationships and family all suck. And that really hurts to encounter that mindset in people. And I know that it comes from a painful place, from painful experiences. But time and time again, when I'm deploying the habits and the mindfulness practices that I've been learning and developing and sharing and witnessing in other people over the last decade, they just simply work. They work exceptionally well. They work through all of the different relationships that we have. I've seamlessly, both of us have talked about through this, whether it's in networking or dating or working with friends, living with friends, all of these different categories, like it's still the same basic principles. It's maintaining strong boundaries. It's being extremely generous with your time and your patience and your kindness toward other people. It's checking in with yourself and giving to yourself and to others the same levels of gratitude and care and curiosity and creativity. And one of the things that I'm striving toward is in my immediate term, launching my podcast, my second season of Date Working, so that I've been interviewing for the last month all the people who I think embody these principles exceptionally well. And I'm putting them on blast and saying like, hey, talk me through, like, how did you become this person? What are you doing now that helps you not feel like the world is on fire and ending right now, and actually makes you feel like you're deeply rooted in your values and ready to move forward? Because I need that too. I've been quarantined for 5 months. I have barely seen daylight in 5 months. And so it's so nice to be able to see people engaging, like grappling with their values, with their relationships, and leading us toward whatever is coming next. And I'm just happy to know that we're all in this together. So that's what I'm striving toward. I want a world where we can work more seamlessly together and creatively build these networks out that are going to serve us for the rest of our lives.
I love it. And so how can we help you?
Oh man.
Describe.
I don't know. It's so hard. I spend so much time helping others that I don't really think about what would help me.
So subscribe to the podcast would be one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You can subscribe to Date Working if you ever want to work with me from a coaching standpoint or consulting standpoint. If you're building a dating app, or if you're looking to get involved with dating in general, I'm 100% available for that. And on our donation page for this event is the Rainforest Trust, which is, I feel like right now there's a lot of attention going toward, like making sure the country doesn't dissolve into a dictatorship, things like that. A lot of like hundreds of years of systemic racism that are coming to the fore, and we're trying to address it. But also I don't want to neglect the fact that like climate change is still a thing. It never stopped being a thing. It's only going to be more of a thing. And I like the idea of buying rainforest land just so we can own it and have it not be given to people who will cut it down. So Rainforest Trust is a charity that is just literally buying rainforest so that it is not sold to loggers. And so the more we can buy at, like, sometimes it's as little as $2 an acre, like that now is an acre that gets to, play host to our natural wildlife that is otherwise just being eradicated from existence. So happily like donate to Rainforest Trust anytime.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for sharing your time. Thank you for everyone. I know we went over the expected time, so I very much appreciate the continuing the conversation and joining Steve and myself for this. Please, we look forward to seeing you next time on the next Strive conversation. I'll give you a sneak peek. Next time, we're going to be talking about normalizing conversations about sex and sex education with two really great people, which I will follow up. And we have a lot of really fun topics coming up for Strive conversation. So please, if you enjoy this, share this with us. We are going to post this on YouTube soon. Please like, subscribe, and comment, as that really helps us out. And if you want to be part of the next Strive conversations, whether as my guest or just an attendee, like that would be great too. So looking forward to it. Thank you, Steve, again, and I hope to see you all again next time.
Thank you, Melissa.